What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome back to my channel. The playoff show just finished as I am recording this, so you guys are going to get my reaction to the college football playoff rankings, also along with the reveal of my personal top 25. We're going to kind of do both in one. Going to kind of show you my poll, which you're going to see here on the left, and then react to the playoff poll, which you're going to see on the right. So it's going to be a 2-in-1. I'm going to jump around a lot. I'm going to try to keep it organized and nice for you guys. But, yeah, wearing contacts today, so you get that. I'm also going to be recording another video later today that I'm going to post tomorrow afternoon, and that is my playoff predictions and New Year's Six bowl game predictions. So you guys can look forward to that. But, hey, thank you guys for clicking on this video. If you guys enjoy, leave a like, comment, subscribe, especially if you want to see more college football content from me. I post videos pretty often, so you guys can expect some content out of me in that regard. But hey, again, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Really does help me out. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this week 10 top 25 poll. And we're going to start from the bottom up, right? So again, my poll over here on the left and the college football playoff poll over on the right. Okay, you see 25 through 21. Now let's talk about it. But first, let's talk about some teams that dropped out. I have Pittsburgh, Iowa State, San Diego State, Coastal Carolina, and Virginia that personally dropped out of my poll. And for the first five out, Pittsburgh, Coastal Carolina right back in there at the first five out. But also Arkansas, NC State, and Louisiana are back in my first five out. Again, you could throw Virginia back in there. You could throw San Diego State back in there. You could throw a team like Wisconsin in there as well that you see at 21st, right? Let's go ahead and talk through my rankings. I have Minnesota at 25. While they have that horrendous loss to Bowling Green is not playing bad football right now. And then, of course, the other loss, first game of the season to Ohio State. Mo Ibrahim, their star running back, is out for the year. Again, tore his Achilles in that first game against Ohio State as well. But other than that, Minnesota has had a pretty solid season. They've beat some pretty solid teams here as well. But again, I'll talk about Minnesota a little bit later. For me, they're at 25. Fresno State is at 24. They are back in the rankings after a great win over a good San Diego State team. I was looking at someone else, right? But no, Fresno State absolutely deserves a spot to be back in my top 25 poll. I think it's where they belong to. They've played Oregon close. They beat UCLA, a team that I think is really good as well. So Fresno State is sitting here at 24. 23 is, for me, is Mississippi State. Mississippi State, you look at their body of work. They have wins over Texas A&M, wins over Kentucky, but they have some questionable losses here as well. Again, that blowout loss to Bama. Who didn't see that one coming, though, right? But that loss to Memphis, possibly some officiating things happened in that Memphis game, but we can talk about that forever, right? Mississippi State for me is at number 23. I think with those two wins, they've done enough for me to be in the top 25, but sitting at 5-3, I'm not ready to jump them over Kentucky quite yet, right? Quite yet, because while the committee has definitely set a pattern that I just kind of foreshadowed, right, with these first rankings, for me, who's watched college football all this season, again, not saying the committee hasn't, but I value more than just the head-to-head, and that's what you're going to see evident throughout my poll, right? SMU is at number 22, dropping 2 spots from last week. I don't give them a lot of penalty to the loss at Houston. I think Houston is a pretty darn good football team, and also, like, what more could you have done if you were at SMU? That kickoff return was fantastic. What more could you have done if you were at SMU, right? So they played good enough to win, just didn't come out that way. And that's their first loss of the year. Still got Cincinnati on the schedule. And I think, SMU should still be ranked here. Penn State, I also think, should still be ranked after that performance against Ohio State. Sean Clifford played well, looked pretty healthy to me. They were able to get down the field with passing right. Dotson Washington was working against a good Ohio State team, a much improved Ohio State team as well. And I don't penalize them a lot there for that win. They played them close, and if it wasn't for the fumble return touchdown, Ohio State only would have won by 2 points. So Penn State I have here at 21st. Now let's go over to the committee's side of things, right? Pitt at number 25. I I'm okay with that. I am okay with Pitt being at 25. No argument from me there. I know I just showed hesitation, but thoughts pressing for later up. But Pitt, perfectly fine with that. Fresno State at 23 above San Diego State. I'm perfectly fine with that too. I see no problem there. Wisconsin above Iowa. This is where I have my first kind of problem, but kind of not, right? So Wisconsin, while, again, they beat Iowa, and, again, the committee's showing this pattern, right? Which, again, will be a precedent for what you see later up. But Wisconsin beating Iowa this past weekend, sure, go ahead, put Wisconsin above Iowa. I just don't think Wisconsin is a top 25 caliber team quite yet, right? I want to see some more improvement, especially on the offensive end. We know how good this defense is. That's where I have my first kind of like, okay, I can see that, but for me, I'm gonna not do that. So, but again, 25 through 21, I don't have too much argument through that. Let's move on now into the top 20. Kentucky is here at number 20, and here's what I mean about Kentucky. Let's switch over to the playoff side of things now, right? They have Mississippi State ahead of Kentucky. Kentucky is 6-2. Their other losses to Georgia. Mississippi State has a loss to Alabama, another loss to Memphis, and another loss to a team that is slipping my mind. But they've beat Texas A&M and they beat Kentucky. So again, you see that head-to-head becoming a factor there, right? Also Mississippi State has a win over NC State, which the committee has ranked as well. So seeing how the committee has ranked these teams, it's not surprising to see Mississippi State at number 17. But to me, I'm just not ready to put them to that extent yet. I have Kentucky at 20th. I still think this is a good football team. I think they ran into, again, a Mississippi State team that was clicking on all cylinders that night. And yeah, Kentucky at 20th. 19th, I have Iowa. Similar argument that I forgo to mention on the last slide. But Iowa, again, I've talked about before this season, not really a whole lot of offense there, but the defense is championship caliber. That's what's keeping them in these rankings right now. Iowa's at 19. Houston is at 18, and this is where I have a problem with the committee. And I'll go ahead and do kind of a package deal here. So Houston wins that game against SMU. They played good enough to win as well. Have yourself a day, Nathaniel Dell, and the kickoff return sealed the deal. I think Houston should be ranked because of that win over a previously undefeated SMU who has looked really good in almost every single game they've played. And then UTSA sitting at undefeated. They have a win over a Power 5 team in Illinois. Conference USA might be overlooked by some, but to me is a pretty decent conference, albeit they still have a lot of their harder games left on the schedule. But neither of those two teams right there are ranked by the playoff committee. And that's where I have my first problem with the playoff committee. While I don't mind NC State being ranked, while I don't mind Pitt being ranked, in my opinion, you got to rank one, if not both of these two teams, because Houston has played really well this season. So is UTSA. That's why they're sitting at 8-0 and 7-1 respectively. I feel like they both have to be at least in the top 25, like 21 through 25, at least. That is just my personal opinion. That's one of the problems I have with the committee in this one. But again, it's not too big of a deal right now. Again, both these teams, in my opinion, can get into the rankings at some time this season. But I just feel like both of them should be ranked, so I was going to give you my 2 cents there. There you go. It's my first problem with the committee. BYU is here at 16th. I made a mistake last week. I put Virginia in as my poll at number 25 instead of a team like BYU or Louisiana. And BYU looked at that and said, oh, no, we're a top 25 team. And then they proved it by scoring 66 points on a Virginia defense that wasn't very good anyway, but 66 points over 700 yards. I have to put BYU back in the rankings. To me, they're at number 16. This is a good football team, even though they've lost to, again, some of the better teams in the nation, though, right? They have that loss to Baylor. The upset loss to Boise State kind of hurts, but the loss to Baylor, not a bad loss for them at all. All right, moving over to the committee side of things, right? Minnesota at 20th. This is where I have a slight problem with the committee, but I'm going to let this one slide. Minnesota is a team that is standing alone on top of the Big Ten West right now, but they have not played Iowa or Wisconsin yet. So I have a problem with them being ranked ahead of both of them right now, especially with that loss to Bowling Green. The loss to Ohio State, sure, no penalty there whatsoever, but the loss to Bowling Green, that's what gets me. That's why Minnesota barely made it into my poll. sitting here at 20th, I think is a little too high. Just like NC State, I think 19th, it's a little too high, but seeing where they ranked Mississippi State, I don't have a problem with that. I already discussed Kentucky and Mississippi State, and then Ole Miss is here at 16th. I think Ole Miss is the top 15 team, but I don't have a huge problem with them being at 16th. With the loss this week to Auburn, now sitting at 6-2, your two losses are to Auburn and Alabama. You guys know how much I like Auburn, so I have Ole Miss higher than 16th. All right, moving out now in here to the top 15. Ole Miss for me is at number 15, while BYU is at 15 for the committee. So we have just swapped places for both of those teams. Again, much same argument. BYU has some great wins on the schedule. Can absolutely see them being at 15th for Ole Miss here. Again, you lose that game to Auburn, a team that I really like, and it was just a case of Ole Miss. They weren't going to fall very far, but other teams started to pass them, right? That is just how rankings work sometimes. 14, I have Baylor. So Baylor has some good wins on the schedule as well, right? That win against BYU, who the committee has at 15th. BYU, their only losses to Oklahoma State, which again is forgivable. They have a win over an Iowa State team that has played pretty solidly this year at times, right? But Oklahoma, a week from Saturday, that's the big game for Baylor in week 12, I believe. No, week 11. My apologies. In week 11, that's the big game for Baylor. That's when we're going to find out how good this Baylor team is. But Baylor moves up 3 spots in my poll from last week. Should be an interesting and fun team to watch. Texas A&M is up 3 spots from last week as well. They were on bye week, so I didn't feel like Baylor did quite enough this past week to pass them. So they just moved up with Baylor, of course. But Texas A&M has that win over Alabama on the resume. But again, the losses to Texas A&M, they're not, can't lose to yourself. The loss to Mississippi State kind of hurts them a little bit, but seeing where Mississippi State is ranked, not a penalty at all. Oklahoma State here is at number 12 for me. Again, you beat Kansas. You're not going to move up very far. But again, this defense has played really well at times this year. And Spencer Sanders is starting to get things together, right? And Wake Forest I have at number 11. I am not ready to put this team in the top 10 quite yet. They Again, and I've said this for multiple weeks, ever since I've had Wake Forest in my poll, they have not played a team that has made your eyes wide and just say, oh, wow, so they beat them. And they don't really have anyone left on the schedule to do that either. You could argue NC State, sure. They also have North Carolina, Clemson, I believe, and then Boston College at the end of the season. So some interesting games still on the schedule for Wake Forest. I think if they can win these next 2 games here against North Carolina and then Clemson, I think that is a great opportunity for Wake Forest for me to jump into the top 10, but I could honestly see them jumping into the top 10 as early as next week, right? So Wake Forest, you will see where the committee ranked them a little bit, but BYU at 15th, I've already talked about that for the committee. 14th is Texas A&M, kind of touched on them already as well. I don't have a problem with Texas A&M being at 14th. Auburn here at 13th. Again, I don't have a problem with this, but I just like Auburn more than most people. I think when they're playing well, that is a very, very good football team. So for Auburn being at 13th, I don't have a lot of problem there from the committee. Baylor and Oklahoma State at 11th and 12th. Again, you see this pattern. Oh, Auburn, Texas A&M play this weekend, right? I wanted to say that as well. But Oklahoma State Baylor, you see the pattern, right? Oklahoma State beat Baylor. They're 1 spot ahead of Baylor. Very similar resumes, but Oklahoma State, because of the head-to-head, is on top of Baylor. That's a pattern that is going to be important later on. But all in all, not a terrible job from the committee so far. I like most of what they've put out. Again, just with the rankings of Houston UTSA, I feel like you maybe missed an opportunity there. But hey, happens. People have different opinions. Let's move on now to the top 10. And at number 10 for me, I have Auburn. There you go. Just talked about Auburn on the last slide. I really like this Auburn team after that win against Ole Miss, where I had number 9. They jump up 3 spots to number 10. Again, I've had this team highly ranked ever since the performance against Georgia, Ole Miss, some of these other teams they played, right? They played Texas A&M this week. That's an interesting matchup, and they still have Alabama later down the line. So this is going to be an interesting Auburn team to watch later down the stretch. We'll see what happens with them from this point on. Michigan is here at number 9. And for me, Michigan, you had every opportunity to close out that game against your in-state rival, what they call the little brother in Michigan State, right? And they didn't. Kenneth Walker took over that game, and they were able to pull away, and Michigan State was able to pull away with a huge win at home, right? For Michigan. This Michigan team is not out of it, although they've made it harder on themselves. They're definitely not out of this Big Ten East race, but now they need a little bit of help, right? Preferably from, I hate to say this, Michigan fans, but from your rivals in Ohio State. Probably need a little bit of help. Need Ohio State to beat Michigan State, so then that way, and maybe Michigan State to lose one more, right? So you need some help from Ohio State. You need some help from Penn State in order to get into that Big Ten East race again. But Michigan, still a very good football team. They're definitely staying in the top 10 at number 9. Number 8 for me is Notre Dame. I like this Notre Dame team. Their only losses to Cincinnati. They're finally getting things together. And honestly, I cannot see them losing another game on the schedule. So they're probably going to hover right around 8th here. They've made it through the 5-game stretch of death with only one loss. And that loss, of course, was to Cincinnati. So not a bad performance from Notre Dame in that stretch at all. We'll see if they can finish the season 11-1 like a lot of people hope. Oregon I have here at number 7. Now, you do not see Oregon in the college football playoff rankings side. Let me explain this. Again, head-to-head is a criteria I decide upon, yes. But I'm not the playoff committee. I am me. I am Tailgate Nate. Oregon, to me, is starting to look like the team that beat Ohio State in week 2. But they're not there yet. If Ohio State and Oregon were to play again right now on a neutral site, say AT&T Stadium in Dallas, if both teams were to travel down there and play right now, I think Ohio State would be favored, and I think Ohio State would win. Granted, Oregon does have the injury to CJ Verdell now. That's a huge hit for them. But Oregon would have Justin Flo back. They would have Kayvon Thibodeau back. Even Noah Sewell playing as well as he is now there as well on that Oregon defense. But for Ohio State, I feel like they're playing some really good football right now. And yes, at times they looked vulnerable in the game against Penn State. I get that. But head-to-head to me is not everything. Oregon, you can argue, out of the teams that you could consider to be in the playoff field right now, they have probably the best win. But they also have arguably the worst loss to a mediocre 3-5 Stanford team. So Oregon's one of those interesting cases to where, again, probably going to have to win out to make the playoffs, but you'll see where the playoff committee put them a little bit later. Oregon, for me, starting to play like that team that beat Ohio State in week 2. I want to continue to see improvement as they have some more difficult games left on the schedule. Oklahoma, for me, here is at number 6. They drop a spot from last week. I don't have a huge, we'll get to Oklahoma. You see them over there, right? Trust me, we'll get there. Oklahoma here at number 6. Again, this team is just kind of moving through their games, but after a struggling performance against Kansas, they come out, handle Texas Tech pretty easily, but from start to finish, this team has not played a 100% complete game. Caleb Williams has given them a spark on the offensive side, and I'm pretty sure Kirk Herbstreit mentioned all the same stuff I'm saying about Oklahoma now. This team has not played a complete performance up until now. But I feel like putting them at number 6 is the right spot for them right now. Still very much in playoff conversation. They get a bye this week. Hopefully they can fix a couple things. Then they got some really interesting games coming up left on their schedule. For the playoff committee, Notre Dame is at number 10. I don't have a huge problem with that. Notre Dame, they've beaten some pretty solid teams. But again, other than the loss to Cincinnati, the win over Wisconsin, who else have they beaten? That's the argument for Notre Dame. Don't have a problem with that. Wake Forest at 9. Also don't have a problem with that. Sam Hartman is playing really well. Again, the only thing about Wake Forest is who else have they beaten, right? Who have they beaten that is worthy of being in the top 25? And right now it's no one. They have North Carolina, Clemson, NC State, Boston College left. We'll see what they can add to their resume from here on out. And I think for Wake Forest, it'd take a miracle for them to make the college football playoff, but they're in the conversation now, right? Oklahoma's at number 8. And this, to me, was the first big shock of the rankings. Oklahoma, while I just said, they have not played a complete performance from the Tulane game up until now. Period. End of story. Western Carolina, I don't count that one. That's an FCS opponent. You blew them out, right? Like you're supposed to do. But for Oklahoma, you got to play a complete game, right? They're still very much in playoff conversation. Absolutely. But they need to buckle down, play a complete game in order for them to be considered more of a threat, right? Michigan is at number 7. I don't have a problem with that either. Cincinnati at number 6. This is also where I have a problem with the rank. I don't have a huge problem with Oklahoma being at 8. I would expect them to be at least ahead of Michigan, so at least at number 7, but a little bit of a surprise for me there. Cincinnati, he is here at number 6. And while I expected something like this to happen, if you're a Cincinnati fan out there right now, I would feel very disrespected. I'd feel very disrespected. You have a great win over a Notre Dame team on the road. But again, the other question becomes, who have they beaten? And I hate to talk about Cincinnati's strength of record, Cincinnati's strength of schedule, but I knew it was going to come into play here. I think Cincinnati, as you guys know, is a really, really good team. The committee still thinks Cincinnati is a good team, but Cincinnati not has to now just look at what's in front of them, but also what's behind them, because Oklahoma is behind them, and they can catch Cincinnati in a hurry with the 3 games that they have left on their schedule. Cincinnati has a shot to play SMU and Houston possibly in the American Athletic Championship game, but again, neither of those teams are ranked by the committee. So it's going to be hard for Cincinnati to get into this playoff race. Can they do it? Yes, they're going to need a little bit of help. Cincinnati, you guys are huge Georgia Bulldog fans right now. In my opinion, you're probably huge Michigan State fans right now as well, making it easier for the committee, ruling out a possible 1-loss Big Ten non-conference champion to overrule Cincinnati, right? But Cincinnati here at number 6. Let's see who we each have in the top 5. I think you guys can guess who each of us have in the top 5 right now. 5 for me is Alabama. You have that loss to Texas A&M. That's not a horrible loss. But for Alabama, the committee put them at number 2, and I think that is also a huge shock to me. While I kind of expected it, probably knew that it was going to happen, I just don't feel like Alabama is deserving of a number 2 ranking right now. To me, that's a little bit projecting into the future, but I also don't necessarily think it matters where Bama is right now because they have that 1 loss. If they lose anywhere before Atlanta or in Atlanta, they're done. And that is a foregone, well, probably not a foregone conclusion, but it's pretty highly likely that if Bama loses again, they're done. Again, no 2-loss team has ever made the college football playoff. See where that goes. Again, Georgia's the easy number 1. I don't think there's much explanation there. Cincinnati, I still have at number 2. I still like this Cincinnati team. Again, the eye test is kind of failing Cincinnati right now. But again, I have both Houston and SMU ranked. Both SMU is definitely on their schedule, but Houston, if they get to the American Athletic Championship game, that's another time for Cincinnati to have a really good win. Michigan State here at number 3, and for Michigan State, again, 3rd in both of the polls. You get a great gritty win against a good Michigan team. I don't have a problem with that at all. Why I put them at number 3, why the committee has them at number 3 here as well. For me, Ohio State is at 4. Again, I have them ahead of Oregon because of the entire body of work. While Ohio State, the loss to Oregon in Columbus, they did not look great in that game. They've been playing, you can argue, some of the best football in the nation beyond that. And again, I like to say Tulsa game. Beyond that Tulsa game, they've been fantastic. And then from Oregon's perspective, you probably have the worst loss out of any team in the top 10. So it's that whole debate, right? But the committee has set a pattern, and I don't mind this pattern at all, but Oregon is ahead of Ohio State because of the head-to-head. And when you have a team with similar resumes, if Oregon didn't have the win against UCLA, I don't think they would be ahead of Ohio State in these rankings, but because they do, similar resumes here, you have to put Oregon on top. But Ohio State does have a win over Minnesota, a team that is ranked by the committee, win over Penn State, a team that is also not ranked by the committee, which I'm also surprised about. But yeah, there you go. Those were my rankings in the college football playoff rankings. I'll leave you guys with that. Thank you so much for watching, clicking on this video. If you guys enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. Do anything you can to help support the channel. It does mean a lot to me. And I'm going to see all of you guys tomorrow. You're going to get 2 videos tomorrow. So I'm going to go record one right now. It's my college football playoff New Year's 6 bowl game predictions. And then you're also going to get the updated playoff picture after the month of October. We're going to project and look ahead into November. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. I'll see all of you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.